I did want to just introduce Andy Hicks. Welcome to People Who Plan. Andy, you're the Chief Transformation Officer at Driven Distribution Group with a depth of experience in supply chain, planning, tariffs, operations. We're going to get into all of that today, which is going to be really fun. So first of all, just wanted to thank you for coming on the pod and joining Michael and I.
Welcome.
Thanks. So I'll get into the story. I wanted to share this. My father taught collision repair at a technical high school for many years. When I was in high school, all I wanted was a vintage Jeep. And so he and I got one at a junkyard and worked on it together in his shop at that school for 2.5 summers. At the time was a small local parts distribution company called Kunkel Automotive from Bel Air, Maryland. And I remember them coming to the shop on a consistent basis. We'd call them up, order the parts, the brake rotors, the alternators, spark plugs, all the type of stuff that we needed for this 1968 Jeepster Commando. It's not the most common of all vehicles. Jeep only made a few thousand of them. Seeing the parts delivery man come into the shop with the box of the part, it was like, it was like Christmas, right? You're getting a new part. They show up, they save the day. You needed it. It's just in time. It's amazing. It was always quite a wonder for me as a 16-year-old how they could get these unique parts that just from all over. I didn't understand at that time how supply chain worked and how distribution existed, but it was amazing to me. I think much like a child might have a similar experience today with having the Amazon package delivered to your home. So I wanted to share that story because as it relates to automotive and parts, it was just an impactful part of my childhood. Yeah. And you and I were talking before we started recording about what it's like for getting that unique part for that Volvo 240DL estate versus the Toyota Camry.
But that's where we look for things like software to help us with that. And typically we categorize brake rotors is the simplest thing to talk about. You have A movers to W movers, and an A, B, C, we stock in a store that can supply you in 1 hour. So A is your Toyota Corollas, your F-150 pickups, your Silverados, the common vehicles are your A movers. B movers, slightly different, C movers. D's and E's are kept in a hub with typically a 2 hour. And then your Volvo would be kept in the distribution center. And it would be put on a network of deliveries because throughout my industry, the expectation of the customer is 1 hour. I place the order and 1 hour later, I'm getting it in my hand. It's one of the fastest. I've been in the grocery business, but we don't even supply an hour. We clear the warehouse out overnight to get to a grocery store, but 1 hour is up there with blood moving around the country and all these sort of things. So we do that, which ties on to something that we're talking about. There are two major things. Just take brake rotors, for instance, that's happened and make systems with AI intelligence now so critical. SKU proliferation. I wasn't in the business. I started in the automotive business in 2010. But the boss there had been in the business since he was a boy. And he said, hey, son, when I started in his business, Ford had 2 starter motors, one for a truck and one for a car. And I knew I had to buy a pallet of each and I was done. Now, every model, every 3 years has a change. So when you see a facelift on the vehicle frontage or whatever, they may change the access, the drilling points or whatever it is on the starter motor or the alternator or whatever, primarily to stop copyright. So people don't copy it. But what that's done for us as inventory, we've become inventory hogs now. And how do you manage that 1,800 SKU? On top of that, your store could be next to a utility company that does the electrical utilities. And they use all F-250s. So they're a mover in that particular store. So learning about what the customer needs, having that forecast, having the adaptability to make at a store level what is an A and a B mover, then as a company, and then develop a supply chain around it. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is with the tariffs over the last 5 or 6 years have been going up and down. Because the supply chain is about touches, how do we reduce touches in the supply chain directly affects the profitability of a company? So we're given the option by a domestic vendor here to order from his factory in China and pick a 10% discount. Okay. So what you do is you order your top 200 SKUs from there and everything. Now tariffs come into play, which were a constant and now variable. Having systems that you can plug in what if scenarios. What my next PO, do I do 150 or 250? What is my lead time? What's the cost of capital to buy that extra inventory in? So having AI and systems like this has become paramount to us to manage that, because having that sort of customer commitment, the biggest investment is not real estate and human capital. It is that inventory, that blob of inventory that you have to buy. And it's generally accepted that you're going to have 15% dead inventory. So anything that can make that 15% go down by X multiples is a direct reflection on EBITDA. And in the automotive sector at the moment, it is very prime for private equity to do roll-ups, and they hate inventory. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. So that's a good tie-in to what's going on in the industry as a whole. That was XL Parts I worked at, Driven, Autumn in Canada, all the four across North America. It doesn't matter who I've worked with. That has been the problem.
There's so many topics within that we could unpack. You're speaking our language, that's for sure. SKU proliferation, Michael and I live that together at Tesla. Tariffs. We didn't touch on Chinese New Year, but I know you've been through an experience with that. But let's take a big picture look just for a moment, because you spent a lot of time in automotive. Give me a sense of the automotive industry and supply chain. Are they using sophisticated software to manage their supply chain, their lead times, their inventory levels? Or is it still a lot based in spreadsheets? What does it look like across that landscape right now?
I would say not a single individual. There's certain teams. The inventory planning team is one of the biggest departments, through, and it is spreadsheet. There are a lot of work like that. There are forecasting systems out there, but there's so many idiosyncrasies in automotive, right and left, front and back. 8 spark plugs. Is it a VA, V4? So it's not just ones and zeros. Should it be stocked or should it not be stocked? And learning your customer base and everything is there. I would honestly say, and this is frightening to say, there is more inventory. If you took the total inventory in the USA of what Auto Parts owns, it's more than the industry needs. There is more inventory in all of these companies than the failure rate of vehicles and everything like that. And the problem is they overestimate this vehicle. And then eventually that goes off the bell curve. It is on a decline and they didn't catch it. And now they're stuck with slow moving inventory to dead inventory. We've got 10 flavors of brake rotor. Some group comes up and says, just like any other industry, oh, these brakes squill. You're done. You know what I mean? There's labor claims involved. So reacting to that, we've just had a massive bankruptcy announcement, First Brands, when Chapter 11 or Chapter 7, I can't remember which one it was, they owned one of the best brake business. So we need to anticipate what's happening there. So there's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of, from vendors and from the automotive parts companies, but also everybody's trying to drive their inventory down and forecast better.
You said systems with AI are becoming critical. Like, where do you think that helps in that journey, specifically in that environment? What's real? Where's the hype?
We get a ton of data, and it's how do you crunch that data? There's other companies out there now. There's one called Parts Tech and Parts Nextpart. what used to happen is we gave them a code to buy from our system, and then they could see all the brakes and everything, and do whatever. Or another customer would want to go on a different system or a different customer, so it'd go that way. But Parts Tech and Nextpart, you load in everybody that you have an account with. You put in the job, and it says, okay, the front brake rotors are cheaper from this guy. The pads are cheaper from this guy. Some hardware from over here, some brake cleaner over here. If you bought this set, you'll be $10 cheap. So it's becoming to take that data, because what also they offer you is the average price that company, that person paid for it. Not the individual company, but in this zip code, they'll pay $34 for that brake rotor. So it starts telling us, AI is telling us about pricing. It's telling us the requirement across all the customers that bought. They sold 10,000 units. So this is a very popular unit. So it helps you predict what's an A mover. It helps you predict what's the right price to sell that in the market. So that's what you need AI to do, is how do I go and take all that information, make adjustments to stock, non-stock, min maxes, whatever, and then take that back through purchase orders, looking at tariffs to say, where do I buy it from? That whole supply chain, taking in that front end data, pushing it through.
Let's talk about tariffs. Tell me how the changing landscapes of tariffs impacted some of the companies that you've worked with in your experience.
So ICO is a commercial lighting company, very high risk on inventory, not very many SKUs. Actually, they're in SKU elimination. They're actually putting in lots of technology to switch the amperage. You don't have to buy a separate light. There's dials you can turn. So they've actually gone through a SKU reduction period. However, they got 100% off in China. So then we were offered Vietnam, and we could get away with 30% tariff. It was considerably cheaper. But how do you buy from Vietnam, and how does that fit into your supply chain? So I went from 120 days to 150 days. And I've gone to a country that I haven't been to and worked with the processes. Do I trust company A? Do I trust company B? I've just literally handed the keys of my company over and hope it will work, because they were changing. There was companies in Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand were just popping up when the first set of tariffs went in. How do I do that? Once I establish that's going to work, I now set 150 days in for my lead time. Is it cheaper still to buy for China and pay the tariff? So I could go back and say, look, I'll leave it with you in China, drop your price by X. I don't have to purchase so much inventory. I don't have that unreliability built in there, because I'm buying this for a massive company-wise expanding its network, and they want 50 new stores next year, and they want the lighting to go with it. So the automotive stayed in China and just negotiated, you take half, I'll take half type of arrangements. But in the lighting business, we moved to Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia. So you literally had to be on planes and checked every single one. And not the lighting business, but what was happening was containers from China were coming down. They were taking it out of China and sticking made in Vietnam and putting it back on the container. So you had to be squeaky clean and everything like that. And then you also have to learn, this is just general supply chain, not systematic, what constitutes made in Vietnam. So it's 30%. And so we made sure that the cardboard and the labor, and how do we get, so we set ourselves a bar of 40. So we was well above it and everything.
But that's just, I mean, it's so interesting, because as chief transformation officer, you're thinking in people, process, systems. You're thinking about changing how the business runs, not just what software do I buy narrowly, right? And so I love the systems level thinking of how you approach this. I am interested, given the dynamic, it's so dynamic, it's changing all the time, your ability to pick software to match the needs of the business. could be challenging because what we need tomorrow or in 2 years or 5 years is going to be a lot different than what we need today. We sometimes think of this as like the now next new horizons of, I know I need this now to solve my problem, but where's my problem going to evolve to? Our view is that classic SaaS, classic sort of dumb software is workable if you have a certain stable level of how the business works. Otherwise, you're having consultants come in and rebuild the system every 18 months to try to keep up. But that AI native solutions have an inherent advantage of that they can evolve very quickly and be reconfigured very quickly. But I'm curious if you're seeing that dynamic play out and how you think about this, because a lot of times we'll hear, well, we're trying to figure out the process and then we'll bring in the tech, right? And it's, well, given it's always moving, by the time we figure out the process, we're never going to be able to make the investments in tests. And so you have this thing of, we're just chasing, we're just in spreadsheets, we're just chasing, trying to keep up with the change in the business. Have you seen that dynamic, that nuance evolve in your work, or how do you approach that data, systems, process, people, incentives, soup of getting something that works?
Particularly with the commercial lighting, first of all, we just looked at the total problem. Like, do we even want to get involved? Do we just want to pay the price and just do status quo? We always say, what are we currently doing? How do I stay status quo just to not rock the boat and know that I can get parts? Well, what we typically do is just map it all out, what's available, get some very clever people in my ops planning team that look at all the different aspects. And then we literally pull it apart, component by component of the supply chain, and indicate what is the variability. So the variability in something you're importing is the cost of a container, the base cost, the cost of a tariff, and the cost of lead time. So how much ahead do I get 90 days after it arrives at port? We would build models in spreadsheets, but it wasn't intuitive enough to say, we could say, okay, it's taken us a month and we can work out it's cheaper to buy it from Vietnam. But like you said, we've just got that done. And then next week, Malaysia's been the country of choice or whatever. And our product team have come back with a different solution. So we built some adaptable stuff in spreadsheets and taken it as far as it go. We use a lot of stuff now in Microsoft Power BI through Microsoft Fabric, building our own sort of question just to crunch the data quicker and have some parameters put in there. But we haven't put diesel in there. So it was a parameter that we didn't put in. And diesel's up, 50%, 40% at the moment. So that's a factor we didn't build in. So shipping costs have gone up. So we captured it there, but we didn't capture it in the road cost. So having a flexibility of something to look at something and analyze it, we do it people first, break the process down, and then get a software solution. But I typically call in software solution people very early in the process, not to start building, but so they understand what we're trying to get to. Quite often, we go through a whole project of what is the process, what do the people think, and then write the spec for IT. It's a collaboration and a partnership, because I've worked on projects where IT come in at the beginning and said, I see where you're trying to go, but if we did this, this, and this, it would be even better. So you've got to plan it out and be very cross-functional when you actually come up with a plan of trying to do that.
I want to talk about Chinese New Year because it's a challenge that all of our clients face from the planning side. And I know you've had to go through it as well. And for us, it was a big initiative this year to create a calendar planning module that allows our clients to adjust from the supplier level all the way down to the SKU level and say, we can't order this SKU between this date and that date, or this supplier is going to be shut down between this date and that date. And so your order times have to be in before here and here. And having that flow through all the way through the purchase order planning, through inventory, was a really important initiative that we worked through this year. Again, because all of our clients are going through it. How do you all plan for Chinese New Year? How does that operationalize itself
So at ICO, I was there when there was a very interesting Chinese New Year. You made a statement, it happens every year. It doesn't happen the same time every year. So it's a moving target. So I think about 2 years or 3 years ago, it happened 1 week after New Year. What I've learned about Chinese New Year over my time is they say they're closing for a week, but the people leave a week early, and when they come back, it's a new staff, so you don't get the same productivity out. So we would typically we would put out planning shutdown for 4 weeks, and then have a 50%, 75, and 100 for the weeks afterwards, potential volume. The other thing about Chinese New Year is they will not have inventory left on the floor. So because they get taxed. If they leave it there for too long, they get their sales tax inside their country. They haven't shown an export certificate, so that what they bought hasn't left the country. So in that case, the last PO they will accept for this particular New Year I'm thinking of was December the 1st. So that's a PO getting there, because the ships still move during Chinese New Year. So, but if we were buying out of Vietnam, it was 150 days. So I had to work out what I wanted to order in June for the very next year, which raised many questions with product development. Are we going to grab the latest and greatest? So they were making more bullish decisions than they would normally. So we would go and say, oh, this new ultraviolet light or blah, blah, blah is the best thing we can get. And we're going to do it. And it bombs because something else come in later on. So the option to Chinese New Year is everybody's nightmare. You make a mistake, your only way out is to put it on an airplane. And there is no way you make profit out of anything you bring out of China by putting it on an airplane. Well, I'm sure for very expensive goods, but the general merchandise we buy is there. So one thing we've learned about Chinese New Year, it shuts definitely down for a thing. But if if it shuts down on the 30th of the month, it takes 30 days to assemble. The last order they would accept from you, anybody, would be the 1st of the month. So they know by the 30th, their building is cleared of everything before they leave for Chinese New Year. And then we would shut it down completely. Then we would add a 5th and a 6th week to the 4-week period. They could not produce. They could accept your purchase order, but they hadn't placed POs for components. And then once they got components in, they were 50. So Chinese New Year is typically something that goes from February to April. And then you get 100% productivity from April to December.
And it's a season that moves around. That's a good way to think about it.
It's very tricky to plan that because a lot of the systems allow you to shut a manufacturing facility down, but they don't let you open up afterwards with 50% productivity.
That's a great point. Last question. For scenario planning, how is that done today? For our atomic clients, we have this ability to compare scenarios versus one another, plans versus one another. We have an AI assistant we call Nucleus, who can see across time into the past to consider what's happened historically, to give some insights to our clients about what could lie in the future. Maybe a specific example of scenario planning that you're currently using today.
One we're using today, and it's surprising, scenario planning is one of the hardest things we go through because what we connect it to is cash flow. We've got all this, it's all forecasting this, it's all doing, we need this part, we need this. And then you say, here's my purchase requirement. And then it goes to finance and they look at that 13-week cash flow and go, no. So that then tells us what vendors gives us preferential rates. Who's on 30 days? Who's 120? So now we're building another scenario. Does the company that does 120 make the same product? So could we take this from this to manage the company's cash flow? In my opinion, supply chain it touches what the customer wants to what finance has available. And it is so paramount that it's not a perfect science, but you get it as close to there and you don't fall over. A lot of people I've seen do forecasting, hit the PO button, and then CFOs, what the hell are you lot doing? Da, 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 da. And it's a collaborative cross-functional work in sales and operational planning. And I even call it the financing. So the end result of the scenario, you all agree, customer wants this. This is what we can buy. This is Chinese New Year. This is tariff. It costs a number out. Does our cash flow sustain that opportunity? If the answer is no, what levers do we have back here to maintain that customer expectation and maintain financial security of the company? You've got to have those options in there.
Well, thank you, Andy. We've covered a lot of ground in the time that we've had together, and I feel like we could keep talking for another hour and still be scratching the surface on this. But the good thing is, as a member of our advisor team, we'll have lots of opportunities to keep engaging and learning together on all these topics. So really appreciate you joining the pod here, and we'll have to book another one in not too distant future.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Excellent, Andy. Andy, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on, and we'll keep in touch and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, Andy.
Bye.
Thanks.
See you. Have a great weekend. Bye.
You too.